Good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you might be. My name is Kevin Michael Grace, and this is the KMG show. So, of course, I'm going to start by talking about the debate. And Jake Tapper was very, very upset by the incivility, particularly from Orange Badman. Let's see, he said on CNN, dumpster fire inside a train wreck, which led me to query, why does everyone on CNN speak like a homosexual? Dana Bash of CNN said, that was a shit show. You say that on TV? I don't know whether they actually said it live, but again, from Jake Tapper, from Breaking 911 reports, Jake Tapper says his friend's sixth grade daughter burst into tears, had to run to bed because she was so appalled by Trump during debate. Well, I guess that shows that she is not yet old enough to sit with the adults. I'm watching this clip from CNN with Jake Tapper, and there's some blonde woman, some bottle blonde, shaking her head like this. She just can't believe it. We've been told for the last 5 years what a horrible, horrible, horrible man Donald Trump is. And yet these people are pretending that this is the first time that they know what he is actually like. It's too funny. It's just too funny. Oh, yes, the civility. Donald Trump has destroyed the civility of American politics. I don't know where they get this idea of civility of American politics first. Let's see. Let's go back to the beginning. The anti-federalists put it about that George Washington wanted to be king of America, that he was a tyrant in embryo. John Adams put it about that Alexander Hamilton was black, which led to the hilariously ahistorical musical of the same name. And I don't know, let's go to 1952, where Harry Truman, we all love Harry Truman, right? Harry Truman said publicly that he believed that Dwight Eisenhower, yes, that would be four-star General Dwight Eisenhower, the leader of the Allied forces during World War II, had sympathy with Nazi ideology. Yes, the halcyon days of dignity and decorum in American politics. Too funny, too funny. Let's see, Michael Tracy says the media's total incuriosity about the ideological underpinnings of the most pervasive riots in half a century now creates a situation where pundits can say with a straight face that the most worrisome source of potential street unrest are joke organizations like the Proud Boys. I'm afraid I don't know very much about the Proud Boys, except that Gavin McInnes had something to do with them. He's the godfather of them, apparently. But what I do know about the Proud Boys suggests to me that they're very much DR3, that Dems are the real racists, that blacks are trapped in the Democratic plantation. I think that's the level that they're at. Oh, the Associated Press breaking. The Commission on Presidential Debate says it will add new tools to maintain order to the upcoming debates after a chaotic first contest between President Trump and Democratic nominee Joe Biden. Donald J. Trump, who is the president of the United States, responded, try getting a new anchor and a smarter Democratic candidate. So President Trump was asked about the debate. He was leaving for Minnesota to campaign. And he said, I thought the debate last night was great. We got tremendous reviews on it. We're hitting what people want, law and order, which Biden was unable to even talk about because he'd lose the radical left, his radical left followers. I don't think there's too many of them left. But I thought it was a great evening. It was an exciting evening. I see the ratings were very high, and it was good to be there. It felt very comfortable, and I appreciate all the good words. So we are going now, and we're going to have a big rally, a lot of people showing up. Mr. President, can you explain what you meant last night when you said that the Proud Boys should stand back and stand by? Trump responded, I don't know who the Proud Boys are, making him one with about, 99% of Americans. I guess you'll have to give me a definition because I really don't know who they are. I can only say they have to stand down, let law enforcement do their work. Law enforcement will do the work more and more as people see how bad this radical liberal Democrat movement is and how weak the law enforcement is going to come back stronger and stronger. But again, I don't know who Proud Boys are. But whoever they are, they have to stand down, let law enforcement do their work. And then they ask, what did you mean by stand by? He responded to that and said, now, Antifa is a real problem because the problem is on the left and Biden refuses to talk about it. He refuses to issue the words law and order. And you saw that last night when he choked up. He can't say the words because he'll lose the rest of the left. So he's got to condemn Antifa. Antifa is a very bad group. So, Mr. President, let me follow white supremacists. They clearly love you and support you. Do you welcome that? Trump said, I want law and order to be a very important part. It's a very important part of my campaign. And when I say that, what I'm talking about is law enforcement the police have to take care, and they should stop defunding the police like they've done in New York. But I'm talking about white supremacists, sir. Do you denounce them? Do you denounce I've always denounced any form of white supremacy. Any form of that you have to denounce. But I also, and Joe Biden has to say something about Antifa. It's not a philosophy. These are people who hit people over the head with baseball bats. He's got to come out and he's got to be strong and he's got to condemn Antifa. And it's very important that he does that. I don't know. I would be tempted to say I don't get to choose my supporters. They're supporting me. I am not supporting them. As for white supremacy, I'd be tempted to say, perhaps you can explain to me what white supremacy actually means. But everyone knows what white supremacy means. No, I don't think everyone knows what white supremacy means. Why don't you tell me what you think it means? Okay, so the New York Times weighed in. And it's hilarious to me to watch anything or see anything from the New York Times because they're maintaining the pretense that they're actually an impartial news source. 2020 presidential debate live updates. Trump faces torrent of criticism from fellow Republicans after failing to denounce white supremacy. The Commission on Presidential Debates plans to change the debate format after President Trump's frequent interruptions derailed the first debate. Oh, dear. The president's attempts to sow doubts about the vote alarmed election experts. Joe Biden is campaigning on a train tour of Ohio and Pennsylvania. He doesn't really ever get very far from home, does he? Well, in South Carolina, a new Quinnipiac poll shows a surprisingly close presidential race. Republicans distanced themselves from Trump for failing to denounce white supremacy, and the president scrambled to defend himself. When it came to TV ratings, Trump versus Biden was no match for Trump versus Clinton. It's the kind of language you might expect from a dictator. Trump's remarks on election integrity and poll watching alarm experts. I've read some of the reviews, Chris Wallace says. I've never been through anything like this. Biden courts voters in Ohio and Pennsylvania. Does your president understand at all what you're going through? Harris, I suppose that would be Kamala Harris, says Trump was dog whistling through a bullhorn with debate comments on the Proud Boys. LeBron James's effort, doesn't he play basketball? To attract more poll workers nets 10,000 volunteers. A new poll shows a close presidential and Senate race in South Carolina. Republicans distanced themselves Wednesday from President Trump for his failure to unambiguously condemn white supremacists during the presidential debate the night before, as Trump faced a torrent of criticism, including a rare rebuke from the Senate's top Republican. The president scrambled to defend himself on Wednesday afternoon, falsely claiming that he had always denounced any form of white supremacy. And after saying at the debate that the Proud Boys, a far-right group that has endorsed violence, should stand by, Trump asserted on Wednesday that he didn't even know who the group is. The president's continued efforts to sow doubt about the integrity of the vote, both of the debate and on Wednesday, alarmed election monitoring experts who said that they feared that he was laying the groundwork to delegitimize the election results. And his raucous, interruption-filled debate performance led the Commission on Presidential Debates to say Wednesday that it would make changes to the format of this year's remaining debates. Taken together, the developments suggested that the debate was shaking up the campaign with a little over a month left until the election. The president's comments on Wednesday came after Senator Tom Scott of South Carolina, the chamber's only Black Republican, said that, quote, white supremacy should be denounced at every turn. I think he misspoke. I think he should correct it. If he doesn't correct it, I guess he didn't misspeak, unquote. This is the result of Republican or right-wing outreach to Black people, is that apparently they have veto power. They have the plenary power to instruct anyone what they can say or cannot say. And this is just so tiresome. Speaking as a Black man, oh, okay, are you going to surprise me? Nope, you're just going to go on about white supremacy and systemic racism and what a horrible life you've had, and these big meanies in the Republican Party who went out of the way to pick you solely because of your skin color. Senator Mitch McConnell of Kentucky, the majority leader and a close ally of the president's, told reporters Wednesday that he agreed with Scott, sharply rebuking Trump's refusal to categorically denounce white supremacy during the presidential debate Tuesday night. Quote, with regard to the white supremacy issue, I want to associate myself with the remarks of Tim Scott, because Tim Scott has the plenary power to make you grovel. He said it was unacceptable not to condemn white supremacists, and so do I, in the strongest possible way. Other Senate Republicans on Capitol Hill largely sought to distance themselves from the president's remarks of the debate and urged Trump to clearly denounce white supremacy. Senator John Thune of South Dakota, the number 2 Republican, said Trump should clear it up. Senator Bill Cassidy, Republican of Louisiana, told reporters he should unequivocally condemn white supremacy. Senator Susan Collins, Republican of Maine, told reporters it was the least educational debate of any presidential debate I've ever seen, and said that Trump should absolutely condemn white supremacy. But the president once again quickly added, speaking today, that left-wing violence was the real problem, and falsely accused former Vice President Joseph R. Biden Jr., don't you just love the New York Times style, of refusing to say the words law enforcement during Tuesday night's presidential debate. Trump has often been criticized for failing to denounce racist, white supremacist, and violent right-wing groups. After a white nationalist rally in Charlottesville, Virginia in 2017 turned deadly, the president did not initially specifically criticize white supremacists or the neo-Nazi slogans that were chanted, blaming hatred, bigotry, and violence on many sides. And at the debate on Tuesday, Trump diverted a question about whether he would condemn white supremacists and militias into an attack on left-wing protesters. It's a particular type of lunacy, as Michael Tracy pointed out, that, oh, yes, when we're talking about violence in the streets, apparently this is all about the Proud Boys, militias, other shadowy right-wing groups. When Biden pointed out that Trump's own FBI director, Christopher Wray, had said that Antifa was an idea, not an organization, the president replied, oh, you've got to be kidding. Wray also said this month that racially motivated violent extremism, mostly from white supremacists, had made up a majority of domestic terrorism threats. I'm really looking forward to, what shall we call it, the Wednesday night massacre, when Wray and all these other quislings get fired. McConnell said Wednesday he didn't believe any Republican senators would be hurt by Trump's bombastic performance during last night's presidential debate. So what did I think of the debate? I think that it's difficult to say because, I'm immersed in all this. Most of the people who are watching the debates are not immersed in all this. And I try to remember what I have dubbed reporter's disease. The people in journalism have this belief, this very dangerous, destructive belief, that the vast majority of people pay as much attention to politics as they do. And with that said, I thought that Biden did surprisingly well. Yes, he did look tired, and at one point in the debate, I could swear he went to sleep for a few moments. But when he said, oh, yes, this word plan, reminded me of that Veep episode of the presidential debates, or the debates amongst Julia Louis-Dreyfus's party, where General Maddox, he got a hold of this word hole, as in, plug hole, above the hole, below the hole. And he just held on to that like a terrier with a bone. And Joe Biden was like that with the word plan. Plan. Doesn't have a plan. But when he said that Trump does not have a plan regarding what is to replace Obamacare, he is absolutely right about that. So if I had to score the debate, 100-point system, I'd say Trump 52, Biden 48. One day a leading politician is going to be asked about global warming, climate change, climate emergency, whatever they're calling it now, and say it's a hoax. Bogus models and faked data. And I was rather hoping that Trump would say that last night, but he didn't. I don't believe for a second that he believes that global warming is a catastrophe in the making, but I suppose it's one of those shibboleths that people have to pay obeisance to. Let's see, back to the New York Times. Trump used the biggest audience of his campaign to urge his supporters to go to the polls and watch very carefully, and continued to suggest, despite no evidence of widespread problems, that the vote would be fraudulent. He also declined to promise not to declare victory until the election was independently certified. Yes, in 1960, the Democrats stole the election by stealing Illinois and Texas. And Richard Nixon was the loser, of course. Nixon wrote in his first memoir, Six Crises, that he had thought of contesting the election because of the obvious fraud, but he decided against it because he thought that this would be damaging to the country. Well, it's good to know that Trump is not like that. He doesn't play by his enemies' rules. Let's see, this is the type of comment that international observers typically would latch on as an attempt at foul play, said Judith Kelly, the dean of the Sanford School of Public Policy at Duke University, who has studied international election monitoring. As far as the rest of the world, this is the kind of comment we would expect in a more authoritarian environment, certainly not in a country that purports to be a beacon of democracy. Authorized election observers are typically trained to follow guidelines to ensure that they do not intimidate voters, she noted. In an environment where we both want to de-densify the polling station environment to keep as safe as possible from a public health standpoint, and an environment where there is ongoing civil unrest that has turned violent at times, Trump's urging is even more concerning. Thomas Carruthers, the senior vice president for studies at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, said that it is unprecedented in modern U.S. history having a sitting U.S. president attack the integrity of the election before an election. There is no parallel. Carruthers said that the president's call for his supporters to go into the polls to watch raised concerns about possible voter intimidation, noting that he had just spoken to a friend who had gone to vote early in Virginia only to be met by a small crowd of Trump supporters. Oh, dear. He's preparing the ground for violent conflict over the election and preparing the ground for a lack of legitimacy for the process. Trump's remarks, he said, threatened to convince his supporters that if he loses, it is only because the election was not fair. Trump's opponent, Joseph R. Biden Jr., there it is again, aired similar concerns on Wednesday, saying that Trump was trying to suggest to his supporters that if he lost, the results would not be legitimate. I don't know any president has ever done that before. Rosa Brooks, a professor at Georgetown Law who organized a series of exercises in June aimed at identifying potential risks to the election and transition, said that she found the president's remarks shocking and added that election monitors and political violence experts would view them as a major early indicator of potential problems. His rhetoric is dangerously and profoundly anti-democratic, she wrote in an email. It's the kind of language you might expect from a dictator, not from the supposed leader of the free world. His job should be to unite Americans and foster stability. Instead, Trump's comments increase the risk of political violence, which is shockingly irresponsible from the president of the United States. Yeah, so, I want to say something about Joe Biden. That name really irritates me. Joseph is one of the great names, but no, he's not Joseph, he's Joe, suggesting that he is just an ordinary Joe. Well, he's not. He's a man who came to Washington, D.C. 47 years ago and never left. He's not an ordinary Joe. Joe is what your friends call you in private. You notice it's not Don Trump, is it? It's Donald Trump. So Trump understands this. The world. Oh, how did the world react to the debate? Every so often, when it comes to things like the presidential debate or climate change, reporters at the Associated Press and elsewhere pretend that they care about the rest of the world. This from Jamie Keaton and Rod McGurk. World reacts with surprise, worry to first Biden-Trump debate. Head-scratching perplexity about U.S. democracy in Australia and Denmark. Oh, Australia, where the premier of the state of Victoria has declared martial law over a virus which has hardly sickened anyone, where people are arrested for planning protests, where old people are smacked down onto the street for breaking curfew. That democracy, Australia. A disdain for chaos and insults between America's presidential contenders in a Chinese Communist Party tabloid. Wait a minute, is Communist China a democracy now? Is that what the Associated Press is trying to tell us? A European market watcher is warning of a credibility deficit in U.S. politics amid fears that a long tradition of peaceful, amicable transfer of power could be in jeopardy. Well, Trump pointed this out last night, that there was no peaceful, amicable transfer of power in 2016. That the Obama government, including Joseph R. Biden Jr., was doing all they could to derail Trump's campaign using illegal means. And then when Trump was inaugurated, they started an ongoing rolling coup attempt against him. Many across the world looked on largely aghast as the first debate between President Donald Trump and Democratic challenger Joe Biden devolved into a verbal slugfest, short on substance, but heavy with implications for America's international image. Emotions and adjectives ran the gamut, but few observers appeared to come away thinking that the last remaining superpower could rise above its bitter partisan rancor as the election looms barely a month away. Steve Saylor has pointed out that Bill Clinton made Trump's presidency possible because Trump is not the sort of man that would be considered as presidential timber, but Bill Clinton changed all that. Let's look at Bill Clinton here. This is a man who in a just world would never have risen above, say, mayor of Hot Springs, Arkansas. But instead he became the president of the United States. This fat, puffy, goony, vulgar caricature. Let's see, in 2016, appearing on 60 Minutes to talk about his presidential affairs with his wife sitting next to him, a wife who was in charge of taking care of bimbo eruptions, a man who, shocking stories from Arkansas state troopers, a man who lied under oath And the Democrats said, oh, no, that's not important. Lying under oath is not important when it's about sex, because everybody lies under oath about sex, right? These are the same people who are carrying on about how shocking they find Donald Trump's behavior. Let's see, if last night's presidential debate was supposed to inform and educate, all it did was merely confirm the credibility deficit in US politics as President Trump and Democratic nominee Joe Biden engaged in what can only be described as a fact-free name-calling contest, wrote Michael Hewson, chief market analyst at CMC Markets UK. Let's talk about the United Kingdom. Let's talk about this weird country where Wales and Scotland gets their own parliaments, but England doesn't. Let's talk about the country where Theresa May simply decided that she was just going to break the law for months and months and months and months. And the conservative attitude was, oh, it would be really embarrassing to dump this woman overboard, even though she has hijacked Parliament. And of course, the United Kingdom is now led by a man who calls himself Boris Johnson. That's not his real name, who is proved to be even worse than Theresa May. While many in Europe fondly recalled the more even-keeled America of yesteryear. Ah, yes, the even-keeled America of yesteryear. These are the same people who insisted that Ronald Reagan, get it, was going to blow up the world, that he was a senile buffoon. These people. Share prices slipped further in Japan, and the dollar weakened against the Japanese yen and the euro. European bourses showed few initial tremors. That is such a relief. But one major worry to emerge from the debate was whether the election results might be challenged or delayed, in part because Trump raised concerns about ballots and possible vote rigging that his critics say are a ploy to tamp down turnout or scare people away from the polls. A highly polarized and possibly legally contested U.S. election is just around the corner, said Stephen Innes of Axicorp, a foreign exchange trading services provider. With mail-in votes likely to be too high and potentially questioned, there is a chance that we will still not know the result by Inauguration Day, with constitutional chaos ensuing. The Democrats have made their plan clear for a long time now, ever since the Transition Integrity Project, that there's only one legitimate result of the election, which is Biden winning. Have we forgot that Hillary and Bill Clinton said that Joe Biden should not concede under any circumstances? So who exactly is trying to steal the election? Let's go to the chat. Okay, Bulgarian horticulture specialist PhD says Dana Bash is a beautiful woman. Is she? Let me check this out. Let me do an image. Ugh, no, I'm sorry. Nope. She looks like Andrea Mitchell's younger sister, actually. Shouldn't put me on like that. Pitsky says, thanks for the retweet, KMG. Made my day. Ha, ha, ha. Well, I'm glad to do it. Tom Anderson, Cheeto fascist, BTFO yet again. Well, you have a bunch of Democrats saying that, no, this is the debates, they're compromised. They're fatally compromised. Biden should not justify this farce any longer, which tells me they think that they lost. Chogokin 666, quote, if after last night's debate you were still voting Trump, unfollow me, you are a racist. That's from every social media. Pete Ferguson says, I don't know what it says about life when I find myself turning to KMG for a voice of reason in an insane, demonic time. Well, glad to be of service. Metal Mike is reporting some issues with the stream. Oh, dear. Sorry to hear about that. Matt Beck says, when Biden started insisting that he was the Democratic Party, his état, c'est moi, prompted me to refer to him as Louis the Juneteenth. That's a good one. That's a good one. Professor Jonathan Pohl says, one drop rule makes lots of people black like Pushkin and Dumas. YT says, hello, friends. David Wright, yes, the civility of telling Trump to shut up, clown. Yeah. Halper says the Proud Boys are more integrated than Antifa. I think that Trump is right. These people should stay off the streets, if only because of the optics of it. That, oh, yes, right-wing militias are the source of violence. Yeah. If defending your own neighborhood, defending your own town is one thing, but traveling across the country to show up in some place like Portland. Look, remember the lessons of Charlottesville, okay? If it's not your town, stay away. Goose says, I just saw a clip of Johnny Carson making fun of Biden 30 plus years ago. YT, I can't believe how butthurt everyone is once again by how brutish Trump was. Once again, oh my God, we can't have it, even though he was once again set up to react. Evil people. Chogokin 666, Fred Perry has banned the black and yellow twin-tipped polo. So now people who have the shirt, who had that shirt way before there was even a Proud Boys, are screwed. YT congratulates or envies Trump's ability to handle jerks. No, I mean, Biden's whole act there on the stage was, do you dare disagree with me? How dare you? Where is your civility? Where is your decorum? Have you no sense of decency, man? And I suppose the funniest moment of the debate was that Biden was going once again to launch into a maudlin paean to his late son, Beau. But he started talking, oh, my son. And Trump said, which one? That was pretty funny. Metal Mike says, why did Fox choose Wallace to do this when Wallace has consistently been biased against Trump? Well, my question would be compared to what? Or compared to whom? I thought he did a pretty good job, actually. I mean, there's a certain logic to a debate, that you move on to different subjects or whatever. And there were several times during the debate where it seemed to become becalmed. But no, I think Wallace, wait till you see the next moderator. Glad they mentioned white supremacy. It's been out of control lately, says YT. Yes. So we had this weird DR3 moment during the debate last night where Trump is attacking Biden for calling some black people super predators. Oh, yeah. Okay. Debreas, on the stacking SCOTUS question, Biden refused to answer and had the guts to tell Trump, would you shut up, man? Civility 101. So Biden's position is he's not going to tell us his position on stacking the court because then that would become the issue, as it should be. Oh, I got to keep this super secret, says Joe Biden. Otherwise, people are going to be talking about it. Okay. Do you denounce the John Birch Society, sir, says David Wright. The Biden campaign had the Shut Up Man t-shirts available for sale early this morning, Metal Mike. British American says Biden actually was barely coherent. Next time, Trump won't make the mistake of interrupting so much as to mask Biden's destination-less meanderings and non sequiturs. Doubt Dems will allow a second round. Yes, I think there's a lot of truth to that we've seen this when Biden is having his so-called campaign appearances where he starts talking and then there's a derailment and you don't know where he's going to end up. Perhaps he's going to tell us that Thomas Edison didn't invent the light bulb. Some black man did, and they should be teaching that in school. Yes, that actually happened earlier this year. Bulgarian horticulture specialist, PhD, says, bring back the WASP elite. How is there not a single member of the old elite willing to step up? Lack of confidence, I would say. Do you concede that Hitler lost the war, says Halper. There was like literally 20 Proud Boys, says Chogokin 666. Well, I mean, there were several dozens of people who went to Portland, weren't there? Okay, so let's get back to it here. Dan Balls. And again, I'd make the same objection to Dan as I would to Joe. Daniel, fine name. Why don't you call yourself Daniel? You're just letting everyone know what a regular guy you are. Trump sets the tone for the worst presidential debate in living memory. No one alive has ever seen a presidential debate like Tuesday night's unseemly shout fest. These are the people who, starting from the 1960s, decided that decorum had to be destroyed, that all common standards had to be destroyed because they were repressive, and they should welcome a figure like Donald Trump. But strangely, they do not. 90 minutes of invective, interruptions, and personal insults. It was an insult to the public as well, and a sad example of the state of American democracy 5 weeks before the election. Let's see, we're talking about a media here that took a great delight some months ago after, remember Stormy Daniels? And remember her lawyer who was now going to prison, I believe? So the media had great delight in discussing at considerable length, with considerable levity, let's say, Donald Trump's penis. But now they're lamenting the sad state of American democracy. On the margins, the debate probably did more to help Biden than the president, a moment when Trump needed to change the shape and trajectory of the campaign. I don't even know what that means. A campaign has a shape? What might that shape be? I don't know, a rectangle? Is that the shape of the campaign and the trajectory? The trajectory is moving on to November 3rd, day by day. That is the trajectory. You can't go back, but that's not what people will remember. Even partisans locked into their choices were probably dispirited at what they were witnessing. And I'm guessing that Dan Balls does not know any Trump supporters, because I don't really think that they were dispirited at what they were witnessing. One can only imagine what the next two debates between the two men will look like. For decades, general election debates have provided Americans with the opportunity to measure the candidates in an open forum, with moderators aiming to stay out of the way when possible, like Candy Crowley, the way she stood out of the way. They've always included showmanship and sharp exchanges, but within the boundaries of what people expect of the presidents. All of that went out of the window Tuesday night. The tone of the debate was established by Trump in the opening minutes, and it never changed to the end of the evening. The president constantly ignored moderator Chris Wallace's, and again, Chris, why not Christopher, repeated pleas to maintain order as he took every opportunity and more to verbally hector Biden, throw his rival off balance, and take up as much space as possible. This was the Trump who lives on Twitter, not someone who occupies the highest office in the land. And of course, Dan Balls, if he was in the media back then, was saying that Bill Clinton was a disgrace and must resign, right? Because that's what an old school politician would have done if he'd found himself in Bill Clinton's position. But no, he decided to brazen it out with bad and permanent consequences for American politics. This is a man who, when he got into sexual trouble, decided to kill foreigners to take people's minds off his peccadillos, blowing up an aspirin factory in the Sudan, for example. But the media was with him all the way. Biden advised to maintain his cool, constantly looked peevish at Trump's behavior, responding at times with well-prepared rejoinders. Man, Biden cleared the low bar of expectations that the Trump campaign had inexplicably set for him, but hardly delivered a shining performance. So what does Wolf Blitzer have to say? He said the first presidential debate between Trump and Biden will raise a lot of questions about having future debates. Clearly, this was the most chaotic presidential debate I've ever seen, Blitzer said. I suspect most of you, if not all, have ever seen. Most chaotic presidential debate. It will certainly raise a lot of questions about the future of the presidential debate between the two candidates. I wouldn't be surprised if this is the last presidential debate between the President of the United States and the former Vice President of the United States, Blitzer said. We shall see fairly soon. Joe Biden clearly showed up today. He went head-to-head with the President of the United States, who was often put on the defensive interrupting the vice president repeatedly. So, of course, Will Blitzer, who is in the tank for Biden and the Democratic Party, what he's telling us is that Biden lost. Because if Biden had won, they'd be looking forward to even more debates. Let's see. Andrea Widberg at American Thinker says the short version of the debate is that Biden did well if one ignored that almost every statement he made was a lie or fantasy. Trump dominated him almost too aggressively, and Chris Wallace may have been the worst and most obviously biased moderator since Candy Crowley. Most significantly, though, Biden and Trump each made a critical point. Biden's was a tacit admission that if he is elected president, he will preside over the end of the filibuster, allowing Democrats to pack the courts and add 2 new Democrat majority states. Trump's point is that he's holding damning evidence about the Democrats' coup attempt. Let's begin with Biden, who's squirming on court packing, and the filibuster promises the end of the American experiment. Chris Wallace, in one of the few tough questions he posed to Biden, said this: "So my question to you is, you have refused in the past to talk about it. Are you willing to tell the American people tonight whether or not you support either ending the filibuster or packing the court?" Biden refused to answer, something that Trump quickly challenged. Here's the colloquy. Biden: "Whatever position I take on that, that'll become the issue. Yet, the issue is the American people should speak. You should go out and vote. You're voting now. Vote." I thought at one point he was going to say vote early and vote often. I think he just pulled himself back from that at the last moment. Vote and let your senators know how strongly you feel. Trump: "Are you going to pack the court?" Biden: "Vote now." Trump: "Are you going to pack the court?" Biden: "Make sure you, in fact, let your people know, your senators." Trump: "He doesn't want to answer the question." Biden: "I'm not going to answer the question." Trump: "Why wouldn't you answer the question? You want to put a lot of new Supreme Court justices, radical left." Biden: "Will you shut up, man?" Trump: "Who's on your list, Joe? Who's on your list?" Wallace: "Gentlemen, I think we've ended this." Biden: "This is so unpresidential." Trump: "He's going to pack the court. He's not going to give a list." You can see that Biden made a nonsense statement to avoid answering whether he will preserve the filibuster and the Supreme Court's current system of 9 justices. Shamefully, Wallace let him get away with not answering. Wallace surely understands that Biden's handlers plan to end the filibuster so that they can pack the court and add D.C. and Puerto Rico as states. Packing the court ends the American experiment as we know it. I don't like this term, American experiment, because as Eric von Kuhn-Ledeen pointed out, well, what happens if it's a failure? Do you just call off the United States? Yeah, we're just going to go back to what it was before 1789, okay? Because this experiment has been a failure. It means that the Supreme Court will be a political body that will exist solely to put its imprimatur on Democrat policies. And for those who say, well, if they pack the court, then Republicans will pack it more when they're in power, that's sadly foolish. If Democrats pack the court, there are no more Republicans. The whole Democratic Republic will be over. Once Democrats pack the court, they will never again need to persuade American voters to support their policies. One of their first policies in that new era will be to add hard left Washington, D.C. and Puerto Rico as the 51st and 57 American states. That means 4 more Democrat Senate votes and a permanent Democrat Party majority. You see, the hard left Democrat Party views our American political system the same way Turkey President Recep Erdogan viewed democracy before becoming a dictator for life. Quote, "Democracy is like a train. We shall get out when we arrive at the station we want," unquote. This time around, once the Democrats win, they will change the rules so they can never lose again. Heed this warning. If Biden wins, our constitutional America is gone. We will be a socialist country. If you don't believe me, just read the Democratic platform. They're not hiding their goals. And that's one of the things that Biden lied about repeatedly last night. Trump, though, might have some aces up his sleeve. When the subject of transition came up, based on Biden's assumption that he will win, Trump stated that he'd been denied a transition period. Instead, there was a coup attempt. Quote, "There was no transition because they came after me trying to do a coup. They came after me spying on my campaign. They started from the day I won and even before I won. From the day I came down the escalator with our first lady. They were a disaster. They were a disgrace to our country, and we've caught them. We've caught them all. We've got it all on tape. We've caught them all." It occurs to me that Trump may have been offering Biden and the Democrats a deal, which is that if they decide not to try to steal the election, or they just accept the fact of Trump victory, then Trump will not have them all indicted, all the way up to Magic Negro Barack Obama, who was in it up to his neck. Maybe Trump's exaggerating, but I don't think so. And maybe he's going to keep that evidence secret, but I don't think that either. My guess is that this October, the Trump administration is going to release one piece of evidence after another, showing that the Democrat Party, from Hillary to Obama, and from the FBI to the CIA to the DOJ and everywhere in between, engaged in a massive seditious conspiracy to overturn the results of the 2016 election. Indeed, the information cascade has already begun with the release of DNI John Ratcliffe's letter about Hillary's conceiving of the Russia hoax. In sum, amidst all the sound and fury of the debate, that these two important points emerged. One, if he wins, Biden will almost certainly sign off on ending the filibuster to pack the courts and add 2 new states for a permanent Democrat majority that will leave the Constitution behind. 2, Trump may have announced that he's about to reveal that the Democrats from Obama on down engaged in a coup against the American president. Someone called Eli Mistal or Mistel. We still aren't prepared for the fact that Trump may steal the election. Someone said a couple of weeks ago that the first rule of Conspiracy Club is that you don't talk about Conspiracy Club. The second rule of Conspiracy Club is that you do not talk about Conspiracy Club. But these clowns have made it known to the whole world repeatedly that they intend to steal the election. If Trump declares victory, anytime before next March, the streets are going to be filled with violent people burning everything down. I don't know, it's going to be like the Paris Commune, only all across America. Multiple times a day, writes Eli Mistal in The Nation, people will text or direct message me a news story and ask me, what can we do? It's usually the last question I'm asked on any radio or television appearance. My mother asks me the question nightly, only she's my mom, so it sounds more of a demand than a question. Why are you writing like a little boy? People who've been paying attention understand that we're losing. They get that the elevation of Amy Coney Barrett to the Supreme Court is functionally unstoppable. They understand that Donald Trump has an infrastructure in place to suppress the vote in the upcoming election. Oh, do tell. Or get his hand-picked justices to hand him the election, or have electoral college voters steal the election, or even use military force to keep himself in power after losing the election. Yeah, which party was it that first brought up the military intervening directly in American politics? Why, that would be the Democrats. And that would be going back to 2017. They know the document leak that shows Trump has been avoiding paying taxes or outright defrauding the American government will cost him no tangible support among his base. Everybody honest knows that last night's debate didn't matter to most voters. Trump's ignorance and incompetence have contributed to over 206,000 American deaths. How? How exactly? Because he didn't roll up his sleeves and decide to, duke it out with COVID-19? If you're still willing to vote for Trump, there's nothing you can say in a 2-hour debate that's going to change your mind. What's harder for people to wrap their minds around is the fact that we've already lost. I know I'm supposed to say that the 2020 election is the most important election of our lifetime, but it's not. The 2016 election was the most important election of our lifetime, and we, as a nation, failed. I see. It's not just that your candidate didn't win, but America, as a nation, failed. The media failed and still fails to cover Trump accurately. Oh, that's quite a harsh shot about Daniel Dale there at CNN, the former Glee cast member, who has discovered that Trump has uttered, 712,000 lies since he was elected president. The left failed to get enthused by an imperfect candidate. That happens in every election, every single election. The right failed to demonstrate any moral or intellectual integrity. You know how the right failed to demonstrate any moral or intellectual integrity? They won. Yeah. Over 100 million people failed to show up. Again, how is this different than any other election? I failed to help enough people understand what was coming because I understood the inherent danger of John Roberts' disastrous decision to gut the Voting Rights Act in Shelby County versus Holder. So the 2020 election is not, in fact, our last chance at victory. It's not an opportunity to right the wrongs of the past. This electoral battle is more like the Battle of Dunkirk. Oh, how very noble. We're fighting for the chance to retreat. We're fighting for the chance to fight another day. That's a very bad metaphor for this reason, because the Germans let the British Expeditionary Force get away and bombed them. If they'd sent the tanks down to the beach, there wouldn't be any BEF. So, Trump is not going to make that mistake. Even if we win, it will take years to regain what we've lost, and some people will never get back what's been taken. Yeah, now you know how the rest of us feel, Eli. The University of Washington study projects 410,000 coronavirus deaths by the end of this year. Let's see. Today's the last day of September, so that leaves October, November, December. So you're saying that over 200,000 people are going to die in the next 3 months. Well, how many people are dying every day in the United States now? And it's not as if the deaths will stop on January 1 or even January 20. No, I'm afraid death is here to stay. Some estimates suggest that 1.3 million Americans would have to die to achieve the mythic goal of herd immunity, and Republicans seem hell-bent on killing every last one of them. I don't know. I don't read the Nation much these days. But I guess it's gone the way of the Atlantic and other publications, which used to be serious and are no longer so. This is from Zero Hedge, Tyler Durden. Nearly 18,000 ballots rejected in Massachusetts primary election. In total, over 1.7 million people voted the primary. Of that, 814,000 arrived by mail, with thousands of people choosing mail-in voting for the first time to take advantage of new election rules enacted due to the pandemic. Of the 18,000 rejected ballots, roughly half were tossed because they arrived late. Another 3,124 ballots were missing signatures or missing the provided mail-in ballot envelope. 1,100 ballots were rejected for other reasons. It's a very unfortunate statistic, said attorney Oren Selstrom, litigation director for Lawyers for Civil Rights. It indicates that thousands of people were disfranchised in the 2020 primary, and thousands more are at risk in the general election if we don't improve our practices. I should think that there's very simple rules for mail-in balloting, and if these people cannot follow these very simple rules, then it strikes me as only being just that their votes do not count. Let's take a look at J5 Killer on Twitter, what he has to say. And he retweets Pax Dickinson, the Duck Redux. The same people who want to abolish the police are at their wits' end because they can't figure out how to make a 74-year-old man stop interrupting. Joe doesn't need to inspire anyone. Being a frail husk of a man propped up by cynical Democratic operators is sufficient. Leftists know he didn't win last night, but they're just figuring out how utterly catastrophic it was for them. Biden on the campaign trail, speaking extemporaneously, only emphasizes how old and frail he actually is. Forget what he's saying. Look at how slow and halting he speaks. He's ancient. Everyone will claim they're voting for him, but no one will show up. He's too pathetic. You can see the grimace on his face, the near panic. And again, he just sort of dribbles out, and then there's a break. And okay, I forgot what I was going to say. I'm going to segue into something else. What might that be? People tell the pollsters they prefer Biden, but they won't mail in the ballot, and they certainly won't leave the house to go to the polling station for a pathetic man like Biden. The more Trump can goad Biden into appearing in public unscripted, the worse this will get. There's a retweet from David Chapman. I rewatched the debate. Biden looked old, slow, and often confused. I didn't notice this the first time because Chris Wallace kept helping Biden, and I was just focused on what people said. Chris Wallace carried Biden, and Biden was worse than he appeared. Watch the debate again. Walt Schaub. Who is Walt Schaub? I see that he has blocked me. I don't know that I've ever heard of him before, but apparently he's blocked me. He's the former director of the Office of Government Ethics. This is his personal account. Oh, wash your hands, he says. Yeah, thank you for that. Is Trump going to have to write another $130,000 check for what he did to the debate last night? I'm not sure Cohen will be willing to negotiate it this time. I honestly have no idea what he is talking about. J5 Killer says, LOL, Walt Schaub provides strong evidence that our pundit class is filled with nothing but morons, dunderheads, and fools. He was trying to say something witty against Trump and fumbled the most basic punchline. That takes real talent. Let's see, Adam Serwer had tweeted, it's sort of wild how many people miss the obvious, which is that Trump's cruelty appeals disproportionately to men across socioeconomic lines. And J5 Killer responds, and to the 40 million people who read 50 Shades of Gray. Again. Oh yes, Biden was talking. I don't know where he got this idea, but he seemed to suggest that there wasn't a single household in America that didn't have an empty seat at the dinner table due to someone dying from COVID. Well, the average age of the people who have died from COVID-19 is, I believe, 84. And it is no longer a tradition in America for people to look after their parents in their sunset years. So these people get shipped off to nursing homes, and that's where these people died. So they weren't sitting at the table to begin with. But again, oh yes, and Biden was talking about COVID-19, being a racist disease because it afflicts minorities more than white people. Well, there's a reason for that. There are several reasons for that. Let's see, obesity, heart disease, diabetes, etc. But they're really trying to sell this idea that COVID-19 is just the most dastardly, the most vicious of viruses because it's racist. Let's see, Dennis Dale. Hello, Dennis. He says, come on, man. I don't know what that is a reference to. Hickma Warrior says, why America loves their elder death camps. Tricky Woo says, I have friends around the world and a huge family. Nobody even got the sniffles. John Roberts has been a dud of a chief, said Donald Robertson. Yeah, I'm going to mention again how he discovered with regard to Obamacare that Congress had a taxing power that they didn't know about. That from 1789, Congress had this special taxing power, but it was a secret, a mystery. And I just, when you're talking about shame, I mean, how can you go on after pulling a whopper like that? But that's the sort of thing that the Supreme Court of the United States has become known for. From in Griswold versus Connecticut, in 1966, they invented a right to privacy. And in Roe v. Wade in 1973, there were the infamous emanations from a penumbra. Adam says, if this is your first night at Conspiracy Club, you have to conspire. Deborah says, what? Lying is nothing. Biden is a citizen of cognitive dissonance land. Hope they get Eric Holder, too, says Donald Robertson. Yeah, Eric Holder was a cabinet minister in Barack Obama's government when Joe Biden was vice president. And Joe Biden apparently was in charge of everything, to hear him tell it. And so the Justice Department, Eric Holder's own Justice Department, had HSBC Bank dead to rights on money laundering for Mexican drug cartels and for its activities with the Iranian government, which is classified under American law as terrorism. And Eric Holder decided that HSBC would not be prosecuted criminally. And this is what he said, that if HSBC had been prosecuted, it would impugn confidence in the banking system, which would in turn impugn confidence in the economy. Yeah, this is the, Scranton versus Wall Street guy. They're all in it together. Chad Chadson says, chat is really finicky today. Too many people saying Proud Boys broke the algorithm. Okay, and there's an allegation against Joe Biden. Brandon Smith says Candy's girth prevented her from possibly being able to stand out of the way. Tricky Woo says, I have to watch chat on alternate devices if there's anything serious commented. Okay. Well, yes, apparently Joe Biden, or it's claimed that Joe Biden said, Inshallah, last night. I think he's pretty much got the Muslim vote locked up already. And, as we know, his friends in the Somali community are definitely on the case. The chat, I don't know, it seems to be working. Okay, so let's get back to it here. And what are we going to talk about here? We are going to talk about, yes. If Trump wins the election, I'm going to move to Canada. We hear this every 4 years. We heard it with regard to Mitt Romney. We heard it with regard to John McCain. Alec Baldwin famously said he was going to leave the country, and he did not. I quite like Alec Baldwin. He's a fine actor, both comedic and dramatic. And, I really get the impression that his leftism is just an act to keep him sweet with the media, because I really think that underneath it all, he's a Long Island Irish Catholic shitlord. And this, you see this emanating from him from time to time, particularly when he says words that we are not supposed to say. Anyways, a story from the New York Post. Google searches for move to Canada spike after presidential debate. The presidential debate may send people up north instead of to the ballot box. Google searches for moving to Canada spiked after the 2020 presidential debate. Queries for how to apply for Canadian citizenship skyrocketed about an hour into the yelling match between the two men, peaking around 10:30 p.m. The search was most popular in the state of Massachusetts, followed by Ohio and Michigan. How to move to Canada and move to Canada also experienced a surge in searches during the debacle of a debate, which was fraught with interruptions, unfinished points, and nasty attacks. Cheering you all on this side of the border. You got this, one Twitter user wrote. I don't even know what that means. Other Canadians were less supportive. Sorry, we built a wall on our southern border. Another joked. It's a pretty serious thing for an adult to abandon his country and move to another. But we've had Americans come to Canada in large numbers before. I mean, in recent times. I mean, if you want to go back, there was a tremendous amount of movement across the border from Canada to the United States and the United States from Canada, in the old days. But I'm thinking of the draft dodgers. A lot of Americans dodging draft came to Canada in the 1960s and 1970s. And let's see, they took over the Simon Fraser University in Vancouver. To give one example, they hated these people, just hated these people, because they really didn't seem to understand that Canada is a separate country. Canada obviously has a lot in common with the United States, children of a common mother, as it says on the Peace Arch. But we're different in all sorts of ways. When I lived in Point Grey in Vancouver in the 1980s, there was an American couple, draft dodger and his American wife, who lived next door. They were nice people, and we got to be friendly with them. But I really had to restrain myself when we were talking to them, because they're just lecturing us, us lesser breeds outside the law, on what's what. So you have abandoned your own country, and you come to my country, and you start lecturing us on what we must do. Oh, yes, this monarchy. You've got to get rid of the monarchy. I'm sorry, when did you show up here? What your superior wisdom means that we have to start dismantling the country? I mean, I really don't think that many of these people are actually going to come, for all sorts of reasons, one of which being is that Canada is simply not important in the great scheme of things. And since these people believe, the people who make the claim that if Trump wins, that's it, I'm done, I'm moving to Canada, they are really afflicted by a sense of self-importance. And it's difficult to be self-important in Canada because, as I say, we don't really count for much. I'm reminded of a scene in Armando Iannucci's movie In the Loop, where the head of diplomacy is talking about Canadians being invited to British government meetings. And he says, they always seem to be just delighted that they're asked. But I saw a lot on Twitter last night of just this smugness from Canadians. And given the fact that the Prime Minister of our country is an idiot, who is only in his position because he is the son of a famous man. Oh, let's see. He was the son of a famous man. He worked as a school teacher. At the age of, 35 or 36, he was going to go back to school again to get another degree. And he abandoned that. So we have a man who at the age of 35 or 36 essentially believes himself to be a failure. Now, of course, Justin Trudeau is what they call a trustafarian. He never needed to work in his life. So his father, Pierre Trudeau, eventually dies, as all men do. And Trudeau gave a speech at his funeral, and his speech indicated that he was sad that his father died, as one might expect. And immediately the call went out, well, Justin Trudeau has to become the leader of the Liberal Party. Why? Why? This is ridiculous. The Liberal Party was handed to him on a plate. This is a man who thinks that entropy is a good thing. He's deeply, deeply stupid, also deeply ignorant. But he became leader of the Liberal Party and was elected prime minister in a wave of, just like his father, a wave of psychosexual hysteria, afflicting not just women, but men as well. And let's see, since COVID-19, he's pretty much disappeared. Oh, Parliament, we don't need Parliament. It would be too dangerous for Parliament. And okay, so why do we need a prime minister? Why do we need MPs? Maybe we could just let the bureaucrats run everything. But last night on Twitter, there were a lot of Canadians being just ridiculous. Oh, we're just so better than the United States. There's a lot of people in my country who don't seem to understand that, the decisions that America makes are important to the rest of the world, whereas the decisions that Canada makes are not important to the rest of the world. They're simply not. But, oh, yes, thankfully we don't have Trump. Someone named Christine Simpson, who, oh, yeah, she's in the media. There's a surprise. Rinkside and features reporter for Sportsnet and Hockey Night in Canada. She tweeted, as a Canadian flag emoji, I have no say in this election, but if you can vote for a lying racist bully, we can't be friends. To which I responded, what I look for most of all in my fellow countrymen and women is a fatuous smugness, and you, Christine, have not disappointed. No, I just, these people who, if there are Americans who move to Canada because of Trump, and they're gonna find out that it's difficult for white people to immigrate to Canada now. That's one thing that they're going to find out. They're just going to be carrying on about Trump. It's like the girl who gets dumped by her boyfriend and says, I'm done with him. I'm finished with him. He's out of my life. It's such a release. And she just won't stop talking about the guy. And that's what these people are like regarding Trump. If they come to Canada, it's just going to be nonstop Trump talk. Another bad man who exercises our elite is Hungary's Prime Minister Viktor Orban. And there is a piece in Politico, a long piece in Politico about this. And it is titled, How Orban Broke the EU and Got Away with It. Hungary's Prime Minister exploited vulnerabilities in the bloc's legal and political systems. How dare he? How dare he? This piece is by a woman called Lily Bayer. And according to the Jewish Telegraphic Agency, she's an American-Israeli-Hungarian reporter, a triple threat, has long sent dispatches from a country seen as slipping dangerously to the far right, and where the place of minorities is increasingly in question, is it now? Politico Europe's former Budapest correspondent, her coverage of Hungary's increasingly anti-democratic government put her on a foreign propagandist list. A state-run site was irked at her coverage of the treatment of George Soros, the Hungarian Jewish billionaire who has been so lambasted by government propaganda campaigns that some have accused Prime Minister Viktor Orban of anti-Semitism. Well, Benjamin Netanyahu is not accusing him of anti-Semitism over George Soros. Bayer made headlines through countless pieces for The Forward, in which she gracefully covered the difficulties of both Jewish and Roma life in Hungary, where many local Jews see anti-Semitism as a problem, and Trump advisor Sebastian Gorka's alleged ties to a pro-Nazi Hungarian group. Now a more general reporter for Politico Europe, Bayer tweets on a variety of topics: Israeli action in Syria, the IDF's controversial new policy toward journalists, the Israeli intelligence firm Black Cube's involvement in Hungary 2018, and much more. I get the impression that Lily Bayer is pretty deeply embedded in the deep state. As Central Europe's troubling anti-democratic trend continues, Bayer's Twitter feed remains indispensable. Yeah, Viktor Orban, he is tremendously popular in Hungary. And democracy, what does democracy mean? Well, it comes from two Greek words, demos, meaning the people, and kratos, meaning power, in a rather brutal way. Democracy means the power of the people. And we're not talking about a republic here, where these people go on and on and on about democracy, and they love democracy, except when their candidate doesn't get the votes. The majority of the people, a very strong majority of the people of Hungary, have decided that they like the way that Viktor Orban does things. And the main opposition party in Hungary is even more right-wing than Viktor Orban is. But in any event, oh yes, Viktor Orban is challenging the EU's core values. Golly, I thought this was supposed to be some sort of economic group, but apparently it's an economic group with core values. It wasn't supposed to be like this. As it grew over the decades, the European Union took great care to ensure that any new member met a series of basic criteria: that its democratic systems were robust, that its judiciary was independent, and that its authorities respected the rule of law and the rights of minorities. What it didn't account for was a scenario where one of its members, having joined the Union, would start to roll things back, leaving the bloc of nominally democratic members with the government using authoritarian tactics to entrench its rule. This is absolutely hilarious. When you have governments all over Europe telling people, you're not allowed to go to the beach, you're not allowed to go to the park, you're not allowed to go to the pub, you're not allowed to leave your house, if you plan a protest against the lockdown, we will hit you with a stringent fine. And this woman is bleating on about the rule of law and authoritarian tactics. And yet, 16 years after the largest expansion in EU history, that's what Hungary under Prime Minister Viktor Orban has been doing, according to watchdogs, MEPs, and EU officials. Last year, the think tank Freedom House, Deep State Org, downgraded its assessment of Hungary to partly free due to sustained attacks on the country's democratic institutions. Over the past decade, the watchdog added, Orban's Fidesz party, it means fidelity, has used its parliamentary supermajority, democracy, to impose restrictions on or assert control over the opposition, the media, religious groups, academia, NGOs, the courts, asylum seekers, and the private sector, to assert control over asylum seekers. These people are not Hungarian citizens. Exactly what rights are they supposed to have? Observers for the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe found that the country's 2018 elections were characterized by a pervasive overlap between state and ruling party resources, undermining contestants' ability to compete on an equal basis. This new Hungary presents a puzzle for the EU as it prepares to roll out its first rule of law report, assessing the bloc's 27 member countries on September 30th. While the Commission has framed the report as a new safeguard to protect democratic institutions across the bloc, few expect it to stop Orban's abuse of the rule of law. Well, I guess you can change the laws, right? Laws get changed all the time. But no, apparently there's an ideal set of laws which must never be disturbed. After all, Orban has spent the past decade getting away with it. The following account draws on interviews with more than a dozen current and former politicians and officials, including former commissioners, former European Parliament rapporteurs, and longtime civil servants. It details the way Orban has capitalized on vulnerabilities in the bloc's legal and political systems to hollow out Hungarian democracy without ever facing meaningful political or economic consequences from the EU. The EU's failure to deal with what it has branded as serious democratic backsliding, again, when we don't get our way, it's no longer a democracy, by one of its own members, has implications that go beyond its relationship with Hungary, with other countries such as Poland facing similar accusations. Oh dear. It raises the question of whether the bloc can hold together as a community of values. The Commission has done its utmost, as said Viviane Reding, who serves as the European Commission's Vice President in charge of justice, fundamental rights, and citizenship from 2010 to 2014. It's very frustrating because the utmost is really not enough in order to solve such a problem, which nobody had, intellectually speaking, foreseen, and didn't put the means and tools in order to handle. This was translated from some other language, it would seem. Let's see. In January 2011, the Prime Minister, fresh from a landslide electoral victory, in which Fidesz won 2/3 of seats in Hungary's legislature. Sounds pretty popular. Sounds pretty democratic, doesn't it? Showed at the European Parliament's plenary in Strasbourg and rebutted accusations that he was undermining press freedom. Hungary had just taken over the rotating presidency of the Council of the EU for the first time, but the occasion was overshadowed by controversy over Budapest's creation of a powerful new media authority, including a media council whose members were all selected by Fidesz. Under the new rules, media accounts had to register with the authority and were required to run content it deemed balanced. Oh, this is good. Orban's appearance in the plenary chamber quickly degenerated into a verbal brawl. French Green MEP, Daniel Cohn-Bendit, visibly agitated, told Orban during a debate that he is on the path of becoming a European Chavez. A number of MEPs in the chamber appeared with tape over their mouths in protests and held up copies of a Hungarian newspaper. You threatened me that Hungary was moving towards a dictatorship, the Hungarian Prime Minister shot back in response to criticism from left-wing Liberal and Green MEPs. What is this if not an insult to the Hungarian people? So what do we know about this French Green MEP, Daniel Cohn-Bendit? We know rather a lot, and it is rather disturbing. He is one of the men of 68, that is to say 1968. That is a long time ago. He's now 75 years of age. He was known as Danny the Red. And let's see. Oh, yeah, I just keep waiting for Wikipedia to cut this out, but it's still there. Cohn-Bendit published a number of provocative statements regarding sex with children in the 1970s and early 1980s, notably in his 1975 book, The Great Bazaar, Der Grosse Bazaar, where he describes erotic encounters with 5-year-olds in his time as a teacher in an anti-authoritarian kindergarten. Since at least 2001, Cohn-Bendit has been accused of defending pedophilia during the 1970s. The controversy resurfaced in 2013 as Cohn-Bendit received the Theodor Heuss Prize. There was a rally by child protection activists. The president of Germany's Federal Constitutional Court cited the book as grounds for his refusal to give the speech at the awards ceremony. The affair triggered wider research into the pro-pedophilia activism which prevailed in the German Green Party without the direct involvement on the part of Cohn-Bendit well into the 1980s. In an article in the Frankfurter Allgemeine Sonntagszeitung, uncovered several repulsive passages in Pflasterstrand, a leftist magazine for which Cohn-Bendit was, under press law, responsible. It cited a 1978 defense of Cohn-Bendit's of this editorial practice, as well as an appearance of Cohn-Bendit in a French television talk show in 1982, where he described a 5-year-old girl undressing him as a eroticomaniac game. Cohn-Bendit reacted to these allegations by claiming that his depictions of erotic encounters with prepubescent girls were not based on true events, but were merely intended as what he calls today obnoxious provocation aimed at questioning sexual morals at the time that, quote, shouldn't have been written that way. Viktor Orban is the bad guy, and Daniel Cohn-Bendit is the good guy. He is showered with various kinds of awards, this nasty, nasty man. Oh, yeah, all that stuff I wrote about having sex with 5-year-olds, that was just a provocation. You can't possibly take that seriously. And so, what, Europe is condemning the United States? Yeah. I'm thinking there was very strong support for pedophilia in the British Labour Party in the 1970s. Harriet Harman, who went on to become a Labour cabinet minister, was well into this. But I don't know, I guess it's considered bad taste to bring this sort of thing up. So let's go back to the chat here. David Ray says, I live in the Metro Detroit area. De Berea says, no chance Dems will hold the House. Yeah, I'm just looking at the House leadership, the Republican House leadership, and they always get these guys that are supposed to be, right-wing and hardcore, and they're always cucks. They're always cucks. If Trump delivers a majority for the Republicans in the House, it should be that he's in a position to force his candidate into the Speaker's job. Okay. Let's see. Detroit includes Metro as well as many areas that are right next to it. Yes, indeed. Donald Robertson says Hervé Risson is sentenced to 17 months of prison for anti-Semitic speech. I'm not familiar with that fellow. John Miller says, De Bereas, I put some money down on Donnie, New Hampshire, Arizona, Pennsylvania, Minnesota, Michigan, and Wisconsin a few weeks ago. No money on the House. I didn't feel too comfortable because of the lack of recruitment of solid GOP candidates. Well, most people vote a straight party ticket, don't they? And if this does turn out to be a Trump landslide, then I think that his chances of taking the House are very good indeed. Yes, Hickma Warrior reminds us that Daniel LaRouge promoted pedo stuff. The Bereas, they will keep counting Republican votes till Christmas, LOL. Yeah, I'd have to disagree with that Eli Mistel fellow. This is the big election because, as the woman at American Greatness pointed out, that if the Democrats win, they're simply going to make it such that the Republicans can never win again. They're also going to eliminate free speech. I mean, entirely eliminate free speech. And of course, Facebook, Twitter, and all the rest would be only too happy to do that. Metal Mike says Poland joined the EU out of fear of Russia. They made a huge mistake. Well, this expansion, well, of course, NATO as well. This expansion of NATO was in violation of the promise that the United States made to Gorbachev. And this isn't just a rumor that the Americans made this promise. It's a fact. It can be demonstrated as so. Trump slide 2020, says Hikma Warrior. EU core value, hate your own country, says a Metal Mike. David Wright says, why would people leave if the cost of living drops? Yeah, I don't know. I mean, isn't it possible that there just could be a wholesale exodus from places like San Francisco? I mean, it costs a fortune to live there, and the place has, pretty much become a hellhole. It's a beautiful city and all, but there are other beautiful places, and of course, physical beauty is not the only reason to choose a city, but of course there are nice parts in pretty much every city. Let's see. Soros is under investigation, as he should be. William Hicks says, I should say the relatively low cost of living in and around Detroit has a lot to do with the exodus of people over the last few decades. We don't want them back. Donald Robertson says, can't somebody jail George Soros? I remember doing a podcast with him with my old podcast partner, Kevin Steele. When would this have been? Like 4 years ago, something like that. And I guess I'd come to the same conclusion with George Soros that I had come to with regard to Ruth Bader Ginsburg, that Soros is going to live forever, that he has made, some sort of Faustian pact. What did you think of Carl's Jr.'s? It turns out I didn't have time to go there. I'm going to use my coupons, or a couple of my coupons, tonight. It was weird, when I was waiting for the debate. So you can watch it on C-SPAN, or you could watch it at The Guardian or whatever. And so I clicked on that, and there it is. And I see people, I see the audience, I see people coming into the theater, and I see people talking, but I can't hear anything. And I thought, but my sound is going out now. This is the worst possible time for my sound to go out. And so I start, messing about and checking this. And then I had an idea, thankfully, which is, why don't I just go to a normal YouTube channel and see if the audio works? And yes, it did. They just decided to cut the audio until the formal beginning of the debate. So I don't know. I could have, I suppose I could have made it to Carl's Jr., but I didn't want to risk it. Orban wants to preserve his country, and this makes him far right, according to globalists like Anne Applebaum. She really is a terrible person, isn't she? I just think that it's strictly ethnic animus with her. But that's what, that's I would describe her nastiness about Central Europe to this. So, she married a Polish man, a rather prominent Polish man who is on the outs in Polish politics these days. And again, well, it's the Polish government must be anti-democratic because we're the good guys and we're supposed to win forever. Let's see, from ABC News, Governor Cuomo says he's not accepting liability for economic losses from COVID. Quote, the federal government is liable. They're going to pay that bill, not us. How is New York City, New York State going to solve the deficit? We're not. It's Donald Trump's deficit. So this is the man who has been patting himself on the back for months now. And, his brother, Chris Cuomo, has been lauding the LoveGov, dishing it 24/7. But now apparently New York is facing an economic disaster. Well, wait a minute. You, LoveGov, were in charge in New York, not Donald Trump. But the economic disaster is Trump's fault? Of course, everything bad that happens in America is Trump's fault. It's I like when Trump last night in the debate, talking about the number of deaths in China and Japan, and Trump said, "What, you believe those numbers?" And it's just a shame that Trump didn't stick with his original plan, that he didn't go down the route of Sweden, because this would be all over. It would be all over by now. And again, he should have stuck with his gut on that. Let's see, from Adam Creighton, the U.S. government last week updated the survival rates, i.e., if infected for COVID 0 to 19, the survival rate is 99.997%. From 20 to 49, the survival rate is 99.98%. For 50 to 69, the survival rate is 99.5%. And the survival rate for people infected with COVID for 70 and older is 94.6%. And Adam Creighton says, didn't see it reported much. Well, there's a reason for that, which is the media is determined to stoke panic. So there is a editorial in Science magazine on the subject of COVID by Christopher Barrett and Michael Yaffe. It's called "All the Wrong Moves in All the Wrong Places." As the world continues to be ravaged by coronavirus disease 2019, three major systemic failures appear to have coalesced to block progress in disease control, containment, and treatment. These failures reflect a perfect storm of governmental ineptitude, scientific ignorance or misprioritization, and the abdication of medical training to market-driven forces. Much has already been written about the dismantling of pre-existing government panels and organizations charged with the oversight of emerging infectious disease by the current administration, which, when combined with lies, denial, and willful disregard for the opinions of its own cadre of expert scientists, physicians, and public health officers, has resulted in regional pandemonium and the lack of a clear national health COVID-19 policy. Whether, as with the 1918 influenza pandemic, we will see a second wave of COVID-19 with a markedly increased killing power this fall remains to be seen, but wishful thinking that COVID-19 will mysteriously vanish is both unfounded and dangerous. Unfortunately, blame for the poor response to the COVID-19 pandemic also resides with the scientific and medical establishments. A nearly monomaniacal focus on diagnostic testing using nucleic acid reagents and antibody-based serology tests reflects the current thinking of limiting transmission as the main mechanism for disease control. However, we know that some patients with clear symptoms of COVID-19 have one or two negative test results before testing positive, which is suggestive of intermittent viral shedding, whereas others may continue to test positively during convalescence due to shedding of degraded virions, when in fact they may no longer be contagious. This testing conundrum is not an indictment of the assays themselves. Instead, it reflects our basic ignorance of viral host dynamics. More worrisome is the observation that just like with the 1918 influenza, people infected with severe acute respiratory syndrome coronavirus 2 can actively transmit the virus to others before they develop any particularly noticeable symptoms. These diagnostic difficulties, especially when compounded by the lack of a uniform national policy on quarantine prevention or risk that would actually make good use of these data, suggest that perhaps it is time to consider alternative measures for conquering the disease. Scientists and clinicians have further contributed to the failure of the medical profession to provide anything better than supportive care to SARS-CoV-2 infected patients because of their inability to apply basic science rationale to a new disease entity. Instead, the last generation and a half of medical practitioners have been raised on a market-driven clinical pathway model of care. When one of us started medical school 35 years ago, physicians were expected to apply their own understanding of basic science, pathology, microbiology, physiology, and pharmacology to diagnose and treat their patients on an individual basis. The success or failure of this approach is debatable because it placed the clear burden for good care on the intelligence, knowledge, and foresight of individual physicians, which may not have been the most universally equitable approach for patients. Instead, over the past 20 years, better uniformity in patient care was obtained by placing patients into pathways. All patients with a particular subtype of disease are treated similarly using a prescribed written pathway guide for care. Market forces lauded the approach, and the physician's primary job became one of patient categorization. Those who could sort more patients into particular pathways the fastest received the greatest financial rewards. Insurance companies and for-profit medical centers loved the approach for its bland and monotonous efficiency. Physicians were now replaceable cogs in a giant medical machine. Somewhere along the line, our deep respect for hard thinking in clinical practice evaporated. Although the clinical pathways approach to care is a highly efficient and useful mechanism for ensuring standard of care treatment for well-studied diseases, it fails miserably when confronting a new disease like COVID-19. Consequently, many of our young physicians, uncomfortable without a guiding pathway document in front of them, now feel intellectually unmoored in the current pandemic, further contributing to their stress. Clinical unease has led to the creation of new COVID-19 clinical pathways within days of when the first infected patients arrive at hospitals, combined with an absurd demand that these pathways be based on data from randomized clinical trials. How, we would ask, is it possible to construct a pathway approach for treatment when we understand almost nothing about the basic or clinical science of the disease in the first place and there are no randomized trials to reference? Perhaps we might try to study the enemy in depth to discern its weaknesses, signaling and otherwise, before resorting to a series of rigid guidelines based, at this point, on the opinions of self-designated experts in the absence of any solid scientific foundation. Now is the time to devote ourselves to studying the science of this new disease and not just use PCR and antibody-based diagnostics to try and run away from it. So last night in the debate, you had Biden hammering Trump on COVID-19. Trump asked, what would you have done differently? And Biden was rather nonplussed at this. But now we have scientists, physicians and the like saying, oh, we didn't know very much about COVID-19, back earlier in this year. But you decided to just go hog wild with a series of restrictions and deeming people inessential workers, destroying society, wrecking the economy, erasing civil rights based on your faulty knowledge. Now, in a just society, these people would be disgraced and we would never hear from them again. Instead, at least in my country, they show up to moan that people send us angry tweets. People send us angry emails. Yeah. I suppose if I had lost my job or, was reduced to poverty because of your decisions, based on what you now admit was poor and faulty data, yeah, I'd be pretty angry too. But no, they're picking on ladies. And I don't think that it's an accident that if you look at the health officers, the latrine wallahs, they seem to be overwhelmingly women, or in Pennsylvania's case, a cis male who became a woman. Let's go to Lockdown Skeptics. Will Jones writes, from tragedy to farce, Boris forgets his own rules. Several million people in the Northeast had yet more Byzantine regulations inflicted on them yesterday by a government that seems never to see a nut that doesn't put it in mind of a hammer. Yet hours later, the Prime Minister himself was unable accurately to explain the new rules. Ross Clark in The Telegraph wrote, the Prime Minister has never exactly been a details man. But even so, his failure accurately to recall the rules he had imposed on several million people in the Northeast only hours before marks a new low in the government's handling of COVID-19. To come up with this myriad of rules, change them every few days, and to impose massive fines for failing to remember them is a form of arbitrary rule which would have shamed one of the czars, let alone a democratically elected UK government. The PM's gaffe comes on the same day that Skills Minister Gillian Keegan was asked on the Today program whether the new restrictions announced for the Northeast would allow 2 households to meet outdoors, and she said she had no idea. Such embarrassments expose the mess which the government has created in its fondness for local lockdowns. If members of the government can't keep up, what hope the rest of the population? Just what is the point of local lockdowns anyway? In dreaming up ever more bizarre regulations and huge fines to go with them, the government has overlooked evidence that is staring it in the face. Local lockdowns don't work. Take Bolton. In the week before local restrictions were imposed on Greater Manchester boroughs at the end of July, 3,886 cases of COVID-19 had been recorded in Bolton. In spite of its residents having been deprived of freedoms which most of the rest of the country enjoyed through the summer, the number of cases there has since mushroomed to a cumulative 9,274. Perhaps someone should tell Angela Merkel as she readies Germany for local lockdowns to counter their second wave. And there's a story here on Spain, which has been with lockdown zealots in charge there, and they're doing worse than other places, say Sweden. As someone noted, Monterey Peninsula College, that it is a sad state of affairs when Sweden is the voice of sanity. A new team of epidemiologists, including Dr. Gabriela Gomez, published a new preprint yesterday with a model that they say fits the data better and makes better predictions. It is based on assuming greater variation in pre-existing immunity and susceptibility, and concludes that most of the slowing and reversal of COVID-19 mortality is explained by the buildup of herd immunity. The piece is written in technical language, so it's not an easy read for non-specialists, but it's an important scientific contribution to modeling this virus and is well worth a look for any armchair or trained epidemiologist. According to the researchers' calculations, the Imperial College model overestimated the counterfactual deaths from COVID-19, the numbers that would have died in the do-nothing scenario in Professor Ferguson et al.'s infamous March 16th report, by a factor of 11.4. If you divide 510,000, which is the number of people who are supposed to have died, according to Professor Ferguson, if you divide that number by 11.4, you get 43,814, which is almost exactly the number that have died so far. In other words, the NHS was never in danger of being overwhelmed. The lockdown made zero difference, and there will be no second wave. As the new 10 p.m. curfew on nightlife causes some of the biggest closing time chaos ever seen, leading Manchester Mayor Andy Burnham to call for the curfew to be scrapped, a reader sends us the messages he received from his daughter who had been out in it. I went on a Saturday night in Manchester for the first time since March, and the 10 p.m. curfew was a bloody shambles. It was horrendous. It was worse than any normal kick-out time I've ever seen in town. Throw into the mix that all the takeaways shut at the same time, so no one could get post-drink food, and it was bloody bedlam. The streets, taxi ranks, bus stops, trams were rammed way more than they should have been under normal circumstances. It's put me off going out again. Bloody joke. I've never seen anything like it. I had a lovely evening, and the bar I had been had done loads to ensure it was a safe and pleasant experience, and not too different to how it would have been prior to lockdown. In fact, it was better, as the music was at a volume where we could still talk. It wasn't packed and sweaty like normal, and it was table service, so there was no queuing at the bar, etc. And then we walked out into absolute chaos. I ended up spending more than I planned so I could get a taxi home rather than squeezing onto the tram. Apparently that's safer, though, than 3 children who spend all day, every day playing together and interacting at school together, having a sleepover in a safe, clean, and supervised environment. Madness. Oh, let's see. This is news from Ayrshire, Scotland, from the Mirror. 2 police officers turned up at a 10-year-old girl's birthday party after a neighbor reported the family for breaking Scotland's strict COVID rules. Mum Leanne McDonald claims relatives had been nipping into her house to hand little Mila her presents. She said she could not believe it when two uniformed officers later entered her home, warning her she was on alert and would be fined and charged if she broke the rules again. Leanne told the Daily Record, "I could not believe it. They came to the door and told me I had been reported for having people in my house. I was shocked. The funny thing is, they actually came into my house to tell me my home was on alert, and if I broke the rules again, I would be fined and charged so the police can come into my house, but my family can't." Yeah. So let's have more criticism of the United States from Europe, where a 10-year-old girl's birthday party is raided by the police. Van Morrison has thanked fans for their recent support as Eric Clapton joins his campaign to save live music. Belfast musician Van played a series of 3 concerts at the London Palladium last week and also released the first of his 3 new lockdown songs, Born to Be Free. Van has been calling for venues to reopen again at full capacity. Now Eric Clapton has come out in support of the campaign. Clapton said, "It is deeply unsettling to see how few gigs are going ahead because of the lockdown restrictions. There are many of us who support Van in his endeavors to save live music. He is an inspiration. We must stand up and be counted because we need to find a way out of this mess. The alternative is not worth thinking about. Live music might never recover." Now, of course, Eric Clapton is a wealthy man, so I don't think that this, the end of live music, is hurting him in the pocketbook, but he's a really decent fellow. And it's really delightful to see that he is speaking out for people who are poorer than himself. Because you see, a lot with these rock stars, the lefty progressive rock stars, they typically take the attitude of, "I'm all right, Jack." So let's talk about celebrity. What strange story or editorial column by Maureen Callahan in the New York Post. How Mariah Carey, Jessica Simpson, and more are making shameful secrets relatable. Mariah Carey's new book makes it official. We are in the golden age of the celebrity memoir. Are we now? Are we? The Meaning of Mariah, published Tuesday and already a critically acclaimed bestseller. So are we really supposed to believe that Mariah Carey actually wrote her own book? Or that Michelle Obama wrote her own book? Or that Jessica Simpson is capable of writing a book? Come on now. Anyway, it follows 3 recent blockbuster confessionals by female superstars, Inside Out by Demi Moore, Open Book by Jessica Simpson, and Michelle Obama's Becoming. I reviewed Inside Out by Demi Moore on the book club when I was still podcasting or live streaming with Luke Ford, and it is one does not finish this book thinking very well of Demi Moore. Let's put it that way. All 4 women have broken barriers. Carey holds multiple Guinness World Records, including the most #1 songs of any solo artist. I think that she should be in the Guinness Book of Records because of the fact that Virgin, the record company, gave her $40 million to go away. Yeah, that's true. Wouldn't you like to be in the position where a company says, "Look, we don't want to do business with you anymore, but we're not going to stop you from doing business with anyone else. So here's $40 million. Just leave quietly, will you?" Moore became the world's highest paid actress when she signed to do 1996's Striptease for $12.5 million, an achievement that earned her the sexist appellation Gimme More. Simpson's fashion and accessories line brings in $1 billion annually. Does it really? Obama, of course, went into the history books in 2008 as America's first Black First Lady. They're talking about this as an achievement. This is an achievement of Michelle Obama. She married the boss. That's what she did. Her becoming First Lady, no. It's solely because her husband was elected president. Yet each woman in her memoir has gone deeper than she had to. inviting fans, casual observers, and the merely curious into complicated and painful parts of her life. Why risk sharing so much, especially since social media is the cheapest, quickest, and most curated way to control one's image? Again, Maureen Callahan, I've talked about some of her columns before. She seems really starstruck here. Does she really believe that these people are telling the truth about what has happened to them? A celebrity memoir, it should be noted, isn't for the weak. Mick Jagger, Billy Joel, even Oprah Winfrey, mother of confessional culture, have all returned massive advances rather than go through it with writing their own. For the stars who go all in, however, the chance to tell their stories unmediated and unfiltered through any lens but their own is a powerful lure. I think that a book gives a person control over their narrative in a way that no other medium really does, says literary agent Nicole Turtolo, who has worked with celebrity authors. The connection between writer and reader is so direct, so intimate, and I think that's particularly compelling for people who are constantly photographed, written about, talked about, and whose image is created in a way via the public perception and conversation. To be able to fully explain oneself and have hours of undivided attention to craft your own narrative is an irresistible opportunity. I don't, as far as Mariah Carey and Jessica Simpson goes, I don't think either of those women has ever expressed a single memorable thought. Not one. But yeah, let's learn more about nothing. Memoir is also, as Demi Moore told the New York Times, a way to work through who one was and has become without the attendant noise of tabloid and social media. Inside Out, Moore said, wasn't so much about re-entering the spotlight as it was reclaiming the narrative. It's more of an awakening, she said of her book, than a comeback. Demi Moore said in her book, which I read, that she can't remember where she was married. She was married in a church for the first time, I don't know, when she was 16 or something, and she can't remember where it was. Am I seriously supposed to believe that a woman is not going to remember where her first wedding took place? I don't think the analogies between memoir writing and therapy are wrong, said one celebrity ghostwriter who has helped several stars pen New York Times bestsellers. Writing a memoir, she said, gives all the things that happen to you a structure and a meaning. You can see patterns. Moore wrote about having been raped at age 15, and her story was wholly unconvincing. Leaving home at 16, youthful hookups with Rob Lowe and John Cryer, an early stardom intervention over her drug use, and her 3 marriages, including humbling stuff about her last to the much younger Ashton Kutcher. Moore describes having lost a 6-month pregnancy during that marriage, her subsequent relapse into drug and alcohol addiction, and to succumbing to a threesome in hopes it would stave off divorce. So, yeah. So Demi Moore has a cheating husband, and she decides that maybe I can save my marriage by inviting another woman into the marital bed. Now, it didn't work. But she tells this story in such a way that it's supposed to make Ashton Kutcher look bad. You're the one who decided a threesome was going to save your marriage. For those of us who grew up watching Moore boldly push against societal constraints, her 1991 Vanity Fair cover, which she posed pregnant and nude, was at the time truly scandalous. Such revelations weren't just heartbreaking, they showed a beating heart beneath the steely veneer. Yes, Demi Moore is the woman who we can blame for eroticizing pregnancy. Now that is truly memorable. Disgusting, but memorable. I wanted to show him how great and fun I could be, Moore writes of her self-abasement. I went into contortions to try to fit the mold of the woman Ashton wanted his wife to be. This is the sort of thing you keep to yourself. You don't tell the world about this because what sort of person is going to think better of you because of this? Many a woman can relate, I suppose so. And what a balm to be reminded that fame and fortune insulate no one from life's indignities. Does Maureen Callahan really believe this is kind of a shock to her? Really, she needs to be reminded about this. I mean, you can just, read the Daily Mail, all the stories about celebrities for women there. And do any of these people seem normal? Do any of these people seem likable? Moore, at 56, reinvented herself by revealing herself. Obama, in her memoir, went where no former first lady had before, because we're not really interested in what first ladies have to say, because it's just a ceremonial job. Well, it's unconstitutional, really. But she opened up on her parents' views on sex, her own fertility struggles, a miscarriage, conceiving both of her daughters through IVF, and attending marriage counseling. This is obviously a bogus story. She said she claims to have suffered a miscarriage, and that's why she had to use IVF. That's not how it works. That is not how it works. The problem of, the possibility of a miscarriage is going to exist regardless of how the child is conceived. Simpson, whose memoir was called Mesmerizing by no less than the New Yorker, which also used to be a serious magazine, wrote about being sexually abused as a small child. This seems to be obligatory. Her fraught, messy relationship with on and off boyfriend, John Mayer. John Mayer infamously described Jessica Simpson as sexual napalm, and Jessica Simpson pretended to be insulted by this. Oh, you hear this woman's hot, this woman's hot. Sexual napalm. Wow. It's like the greatest advertisement, any celebrity had ever got. Well, her addiction to alcohol and sleeping pills, and a near lifelong battle with weight that began in 1997 at age 17, when record company executive Tommy Mottola told her, "You've got to lose 15 pounds, demanding six-pack abs after her first single hit the charts. Interestingly, Mottola also figures as a villain in Carrie's memoir. Here, the self-described elusive chanteuse reveals more about her marriage to Mottola, long rumored to be controlling and abusive, than ever before. She also writes about her traumatic childhood, again obligatory, as the daughter of a black father and white mother. This claim by Mariah Carey to be black, is she really black? She had a black father. Really, like, how black? I'm really, it's the one drop rule in reverse. Let's see. Of her sister allegedly pimping her out as a 12-year-old girl, which her single sister strongly denies, and of the time her then husband Mottola allegedly put a knife to her cheek, threatening her looks and her livelihood, followed by her liberating affair by Derek Jeter. Derek Jeter has slept with more hot women than I've had hot dinners. I really don't. Does Derek Jeter even remember that? For millions who love the genre, myself among them, it's been interesting to watch this sudden spate of celebrity memoirs raise the bar, not just in terms of candidness, but also quality. Obama, Moore, Simpson, and Carey each worked with distinguished ghostwriters to produce not just bestsellers that would generate headlines, but books that are highly readable and immediately entered the canon. This is not a serious woman. People's flaws are what make them lovable, the ghostwriter said. I think we love celebrities more if we know that they have suffered or screwed up than we would if they were just happy, perfect Barbie dolls. In essence, the opposite of most social media avatars. No, this is wholly destructive. That you have these celebrities, and I'm assuming that there's some normal, decent people among them, but, oh no, you're boring. People consider you boring. So what? No, you got to get some scandal in your life. And these people, they are driven to seek destructive behavior because they want to be in the news. Or they just, I don't know. Who's that fat half-Thai woman, formerly a model? And, oh, yes, her latest, pregnancy crisis. And we're getting updates on this every single day. What's her name? Chrissy Teigen or Teigen. It's just the thirstiness of this woman. It's just remarkable. Let's see. Our most recent proof: the glamorous Mariah Carey, as controlling of her image as Barbra Streisand. Both divas have long insisted on only one side of their face being photographed. writes openly of a destitute and dangerous childhood, one that shaped her more than anything. As she recalls in her memoir, writing of a time police were called to her troubled home when she was just 6 years old, one of the cops, looking down at me but speaking to another cop beside him, said, "If this kid makes it, it'll be a miracle." And that night, I became less of a kid and more of a miracle. I'm just thinking that if the cop actually said this to her when she was 6 years old, she filed it away. Yep, this is going to be perfect for the memoir. My childhood was more miserable than yours. Okay, let's have a final look at the chat. Yes, I'm not going to repeat this from Donald Robertson about Demi Moore. When William Hicks says when one compares those postmodern celebs to those of yesteryear, like Hedy Lamarr, Agnes Moorehead, or Betty Davis, it's quite a contrast. I recall my parents, and one of my parents had bought a copy of Hedy Lamarr's memoir, which was thought to be tremendously scandalous. Donald Robertson, Bob Crane was the last decent celebrity. Bob Crane. Bob Crane. You know, this reality distortion field that happens to celebrities, that Bob Crane thought it would be a good idea to show pictures of, naked women, Schmeil photographs, a bunch of pictures, Polaroids of naked women, to show them to Donna Reed. Yeah, Bob Crane thought that was a good idea. Okay. Jessica Simpson is pro-Trump. No, I don't know about that. DeBrea says Michelle Obama will run in 2024 and will lose against Ivanka Trump. Michelle Obama is a lawyer. Well, not a practicing lawyer. She handed in her law license quite a few years ago. William Hicks says, I've seen a variety of stories about people getting shot over masking. The expression at the barrel of a gun isn't an exaggeration where the COVID restrictions are concerned. William Hicks, go Sweden. LOL, Dr. Tegnell is the man. DeBreas, there will be no Democrat president for the next 16 years. They shouldn't go on Trump. I just think the Democrats have crossed a line. And I think that Trump was warning them last night that if they keep this up, their leaders all risk going to prison, or at the very least being bankrupted by legal fees, as General Kelly was. We need a classic KMG saying fact checked angrily. William Hicks, 94.6% is pretty high. Apparently it's a good time to be an old person. Oh, wait, I live in the time of delusion when nobody is supposed to die from natural causes. Okay, so that's it for today's show. And I will be back tomorrow, Thursday, with a Theater Thursday. And I'm going to be talking about a comedy from 1981, directed and co-written by Albert Brooks, called Modern Romance. And I tweeted the other day after rewatching this film that you hear a lot about cringe comedy and where it comes from. I think that Albert Brooks bids fair to be the inventor of cringe comedy. Modern Romance is a hilarious movie, but I found it often difficult or even painful to watch because the character that Albert Brooks plays in this movie is simply so, it's not so much obnoxious as just he seems to, well, let's put it this way. Imagine that you were a film editor in Hollywood and you drove a Porsche and you had a nice house and your girlfriend was the most beautiful woman in the world. Not an exaggeration, okay? So would you think, I've been blessed, I've had a blessed life? Or would you say, I have to screw this up somehow? And that's what Albert Brooks does in Modern Romance, which I'm going to be talking about tomorrow in the book club. I am going to be discussing a famous memoir, Up from Slavery, by Booker T. Washington. So I'll be back in the air tomorrow at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. If you like the show or any part of it, I'd appreciate it if you'd click on the like button and subscribe to my YouTube channel if you have not already done so. If you would like to support this live stream with a donation, which would be greatly appreciated, at this particular time. My PayPal account is attached to Kevin_Grace@hotmail.com. Once again, Kevin_Grace@hotmail.com. If you're Canadian, you can send me money directly via interact@kevingrace@shaw.ca. And I will leave you with this. In these days of social atomization and civilizational collapse, I do dearly wish that you, my dear listeners and viewers, manage to form some genuine human connection in order to ease the burden. Good night.